but our humanity was obliterated. Do we get a chance to reclaim it? I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
I am prepared to close, Mr. Speaker, if the gentleman will yield back his time.
I'll yield back.
The gentleman yields. The gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, this bill is really not as complicated as my good friend from Ohio tries to make it appear to be. Now, I recognize, and we've had conversations on this when the bill was introduced, and I respect his opinion, but I respectively disagree with his opinion and his arguments. There's nothing wrong with that. After all, we're Americans, and we can do that in America. But I want to, what the gentleman, what I heard him saying was dealing in what if and what would be an ideal world. Well, we all would like to have an ideal world, but let's talk about reality at that time. We were forced into the Second World War. Germany, of course, had started, some could say started that war with their blitzkrieg on September 1st, 1939 into Poland. You could say it may have started when Japan started expanding where they were going in the Pacific, and certainly when they attacked us on December 7th, 1941. Whether we liked it or not, we are in a war for survival. There's no question about that. That is simply the facts. And in the process of carrying out that war, and by the way, Mr. Speaker, let me say that war is absolutely unpredictable. Because if you're logically thinking about war, if it were predictable, it wouldn't have happened in the first place. But the very nature of war is unpredictable. So we didn't know where we were, but we had heard that the Nazi Germany was developing an atomic weapon. Now, they had been building a military machine long before, because we were caught a bit off guard in the Second World War. We're not a warring nation. So we had to use whatever technology we have in order to defend our freedoms. And one way that was decided was to build an atomic weapon if we had to use that atomic weapon. And what this bill purports to do is nothing more than to talk about the ingenuity of the American people to develop this weapon when the nuclear industry was relatively in its infancy, and did it in such a short time frame. That is something that we ought to put into our history books, because we do put past battles in our history books. Just earlier this week was the 150th anniversary of Antietam, right up the road here in Sharpsburg, Maryland, the largest single-day casualty in American history at that time. And yet we memorialize the battlefield because it helped preserve our Union and get our Union back together. So I think it's right that we look at these from that perspective. Now, I can only imagine how difficult a decision was for President Truman shortly after President Roosevelt had died to make this decision. But he made it because, in his judgment, given the information he had, it would probably save more lives than it would cost by dropping the bombs. That was a judgment he made. Let me speak just a little bit about, again, the ingenuity and the technology of what happened, and I can only speak about my area, Hanford, and about specifically the B reactor. This is the first nuclear reactor that was built in this country. And from start to finish, it was built in less than a year. And the technology at that point wasn't even proven. And yet when they started the B reactor and went hot, as they said, it obviously did what it was supposed to do. It was a tremendous scientific achievement. And to open this up to the public and open this up to school children to see what we can do and what we did in this country to protect the freedoms and liberty we have, I think is worth preserving. And again, all this does is take those three main sites that largely are all already owned by the government, transfer it to a National Park Service, and show it to the public so we can learn and remember what happened during that time. And finally, Mr. Speaker, let me say that I've been down on this floor many times criticizing the Obama administration. But the Obama administration, through Secretary Salazar at the Department of Interior, is in favor of legislation establishing precisely what this bill and the Senate bill hope to do. And so while I have differences with them, I certainly congratulate them for recognizing how important this legislation is. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I urge adoption of the legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5987 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no.
No.
In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
On that, I ask for recorded vote.
I ask for the yeas and nays. The yeas and nays are requested. All those in favor of taking this vote by the yeas and nays will rise and remain standing until counted. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8, the Rule 20, further proceedings on this question will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5910, the Global Investment in American Jobs Act of 2012, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 5910, a bill to direct the Secretary of Commerce, in coordination with the heads of other relevant federal departments and agencies, to produce a report on enhancing the competitiveness of the United States in attracting foreign direct investment and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlewoman from California, Mrs. Bono Mack, and the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Barrow, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials into the record on H.R. 5910.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the House Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing and Trade, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 5910, the Global Investment in America Jobs Act of 2012. This legislation directs the Department of Commerce, in coordination with the heads of other relevant federal departments, to produce an interagency report on enhancing the competitiveness of the United States in attracting foreign direct investment. This is a common-sense, bipartisan approach to creating new jobs in America, and I would like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Dold, Mr. Peters, Mr. Roskam, and Mr. Barrow, for their hard work on this important legislation. I would also like to thank Energy and Commerce Committee Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Waxman, and Subcommittee Ranking Member Butterfield for all agreeing to bring H.R. 5190 to the floor. It has the strong support of leading business groups, including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the Organization for International Investment, the Association of Global Automakers, and the National Association of Manufacturers. Today, with our economy stuck in a dangerous quagmire and with unemployment still above 8% for a record 43 straight months, we need to take a long, hard look at U.S. laws and policies which serve as barriers to foreign direct investment in our nation here at home. The goal of the Global Investment in American Jobs Act is to produce a much-needed competitiveness assessment report to Congress, along with a list of recommendations to make the U.S. more appealing to global companies seeking to expand beyond their borders. This legislation comes at a very critical time. The value of cross-border investment has grown dramatically around the world, but America simply isn't cashing in like it once did. Just a decade ago, the U.S. attracted more than 41% of all global foreign investment. Today, that number has fallen to 18%, a steep, costly, and unacceptable decline. In many ways, we're being out-recruited by other nations. In a recent global ranking of the world's competitive economies, the U.S. slipped from 5th to 7th, marking the 4th straight year in which our nation has shown a decline, despite having the world's largest economy. This constant chipping away at America's ability to compete for foreign investment is contributing to our unacceptably high unemployment rate and adding to our exploding national debt. This legislation is simply one way to fight back. International investment has long served as an engine for U.S. economic prosperity, and it can play an important role in our economic recovery in the years ahead. Today, the U.S. subsidiaries of international companies employ 5.3 million American workers, account for about 15% of the country's manufacturing workforce, produce more than 20% of all U.S. goods exported, and fund more than $40 billion of annual research and development activities. These companies also support a diverse supplier network throughout our country, purchasing roughly $2 trillion in annual goods and services that help to sustain thousands of small and medium-sized American companies. The Global Investment in American Jobs Act aims for the very first time to identify barriers to new investment and to produce a roadmap for attracting and retaining top-tier businesses from around the world. Strong investment promotion policy will not only spur international companies to create jobs here in the U.S., but it will also encourage other nations to open their markets to U.S. investment necessary to access foreign markets. Simply put, this legislation sends an important message to the world. Today, America is not only open for business, but it's also a great place to do business. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Without objection. Recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I too rise in support of H.R. 5910, the Global Investment in American Jobs Act of 2012. Our success as a country depends more and more on being competitive in a global economy. The United States has historically been a very attractive investment for foreign businesses. In fact, foreign-owned businesses add over 5 million good-paying jobs to the U.S. labor force, produce nearly 18% of all U.S. exports, pay nearly 17% of all U.S. corporate income taxes, and purchase nearly $2 trillion in goods and services from other domestic small businesses. This bill simply requires the Department of Commerce to work with the heads of other relevant federal departments to conduct a review of U.S. laws and policies that affect foreign investment in the U.S., and then make recommendations on how we can be more competitive in attracting foreign investment. As our global competitors continue to develop, we have to evolve as well just to keep up. This bill will give us a fuller picture of our challenges and opportunities so we can develop a coordinated strategy for economic success. It's the key to our economic well-being in the decades to come. I want to thank Congressman Dole, Congressman Roscom, and Congressman Peters for their collaborative and bipartisan work on this bill. Working together isn't just the right way to do things around here, it's the only way to actually get anything done around here. However much we may tend to forget that in this body, it's the only way to truly represent the nation as a whole. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'll reserve the balance of our time.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I am pleased to yield 5 minutes to one of the very hardworking authors of this legislation, Mr. Dole. 5 minutes.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I certainly want to thank my good friend from California for yielding the time and for her leadership on the subcommittee. Mr. Speaker, global investment grows our economy right here at home. It means good-paying, solid American jobs. The United States is the premier location around the world for companies to invest and establish operations. But the reality is that other nations are getting better at challenging the United States for foreign direct investment opportunities. In fact, the United States' share of global foreign investment has declined, as my friend from California pointed out, from over 41% in 1999 to to what is under 18%, actually 17.6% in 2009. While America still leads the way in attracting this inbound or inward investment, the data makes it clear that we must do better in order to remain the premier location for global investment in the 21st century. That's why I'm proud to introduce and champion H.R. 5910, the Global Investment in American Jobs Act. I urge my colleagues who are focused on improving our economy and creating American jobs to vote in support of this legislation so that it can get signed quickly by the President. The Global Investment in American Jobs Act has earned broad bipartisan support, both here in the House and in the United States Senate. And I want to thank Congressman Roscom, Congressman Barrow, Congressman Peters, as well as Senators Kerry and Corker for helping lead the push for this legislation. I also want to thank the many co-sponsors who recognize how important this legislation is to growing our economy and keeping jobs here at home. This legislation provides a roadmap for enhancing the U.S. competitiveness and attracting foreign direct investment into the United States. It does this by expanding on an existing Commerce Department report and charges the Commerce Department to identify certain policies and regulations, whether those are in existence intentionally or, more importantly, indirectly or unintentionally, that might uniquely create a barrier for investment here in the United States. It also helps us gain a better understanding of which current policies promote this much-needed global investment into the United States and into our communities. Mr. Speaker, in Illinois, insourcing currently accounts for about a little over 273,000 direct jobs, including many great jobs in the 10th District of Illinois. But it's not just in Illinois. The benefits of this inbound investment is seen in literally every state, helping us to sustain innovation, manufacturing, trade, supplier networks, and over 5 million direct jobs throughout our nation. But with other nations actively reforming their policies in an effort to make their countries increasingly more competitive for these global investments, it's critical that the United States do the same. Promoting and encouraging global investment into our country and the jobs that will come with it is something that we all should promote. It is something that has been identified as key to economic growth in our country, certainly in the Chicago region, and it is something that I'm proud to lead the charge on in Congress. I urge my colleagues to vote yea in the legislation, and I want to thank my colleague from Georgia for his help and leadership as well. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Georgia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There being no further speakers on our side, I would inquire of the gentlelady from California if she has any further speakers on hers.
No, I do not have any further speakers at this time. I'm prepared to close.
With that, Mr. Speaker, it falls me only to thank once again Congressman Dole, Congressman Roscom, and Congressman Peters for the work on this bill. And with that, I yield back the balance of our time.
The gentleman from Georgia yields back. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'm just going to say that there is absolutely no magic bullet for putting Americans back to work again. But what we can do and what we should do is eliminate the endless roadblocks to job creation, which are acting like a tire boot on the U.S. economy. Today, we're simply going nowhere fast. This bill will help to get America moving again by removing many of those barriers and by developing a much-needed plan for attracting top-tier businesses from around the world. Today, with more than 23 million Americans who are unemployed or underemployed, it's time to cut that tire boot off of our economy and to develop a new roadmap for prosperity. The Global Investment in American Jobs Act of 2012 is one way for us to start on that journey. Mr. Speaker, again, I applaud my colleagues for their hard work, and I thank them very much for what they've done. I strongly urge all of my colleagues to adopt H.R. 5910. It is a bipartisan bill. It's supported by leading business groups, and when it comes to job creation, it's another piece to the puzzle that simply fits perfectly. So I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 5910 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentlelady from California seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4212, the Drywall Safety Act of 2012, as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4212, a bill to designate drywall manufactured in China a banned hazardous product and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentlelady from California, Mrs. Bono Mack, and the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Deutsch, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentlelady from California.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials into the record on H.R. 4212. And at this time, I would like to include an exchange of letters between the Committee on Energy and Commerce and the Committee on Foreign Affairs.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield as much time as I may consume.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As Chairman of the House Subcommittee on Commerce, Manufacturing and Trade, which has jurisdiction over the Consumer Product Safety Commission, I rise today in strong support of H.R. 4212, an important bipartisan bill to help the federal government fight the problem of defective and potentially hazardous Chinese drywall. I would like to thank my colleague, Mr. Rigel of Virginia, for all of his hard pardon me.
Very good.
Okay, for all of his hard and thoughtful, they've told me 5 times, I apologize, for all of his hard and thoughtful work on the support and legislation. Today, if something smells rotten in your home or your business, Chinese drywall may be to blame. Scientific laboratory tests have identified emissions from some of this drywall to include sulfurous gases such as hydrogen sulfide, which leaves a stench much like rotten eggs. It's time to address this widespread problem, which exploded across our landscape after Hurricane Katrina. By some estimates, enough suspect Chinese drywall has entered the U.S. since 2006 to build more than 60,000 American homes, many of which are located in southeastern U.S. But here's the problem. The emissions from contaminated drywall worsen as the temperature and the humidity rise, causing copper surfaces, including pipes, wiring, and air conditioning coils, to become blackened and corroded. As a result, many people have complained about respiratory problems such as chronic coughing, asthma attacks, and difficulty in breathing, and that's in addition to headaches and sinus issues. Most of the companies which made this bad drywall are owned, at least in part, by the Chinese government, and they have steadfastly refused to appear in American courts or to cooperate with the federal government's ongoing safety investigation. In some cases, U.S. builders, to their credit, have stepped up on their own to remediate the problem, but thousands of others have had to sue or simply eat the costs of replacing this drywall. H.R. 4212 is one way to help prevent this problem from happening again in the future. But at the same time, we're also trying to help people who have already been impacted. This bill directs the Secretary of Commerce to work with the Chinese government in coming up with a fair solution to settle outstanding claims. In addition, H.R. 4212 requires labeling of all drywall with the name of the manufacturer and the date of its manufacture. In the past, the lack of this critically important information has been a real problem because homeowners couldn't tell, in many cases, which company manufactured that bad drywall. And finally, this legislation requires the Consumer Product Safety Commission to promulgate an important new standard to limit the sulfur content of drywall unless industry comes up with an acceptable voluntary standard first. Mr. Speaker, science has spoken. This isn't a case of we think we have a problem. Today we know we have a problem. China chooses to ignore it, but America chooses to do something about it. I strongly urge the adoption of this bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would be prepared to reserve my time if my friend Mr. Rigel would like to speak first.
The gentleman from Florida reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to recognize my colleague and author of this bill and very hard worker for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentlelady for yielding, and I thank my colleagues for being here tonight to support really a great and much-needed piece of legislation. And I do rise in strong support of the Drywall Safety Act of 2012. This truly is a bill about protecting the American family, both their physical health and their financial health. Mr. Speaker, this is about doing what is right to address a terrible injustice that has fallen upon so many families, many of whom live in the 2nd Congressional District of Virginia, and thousands across our country. These are families that are reeling financially and also in their health, has been damaged because of drywall that was manufactured in a defective manner in China and then shipped to the United States and installed in homes across our great land. Now, there are friends and neighbors, just hard-working folks who saved, bought homes, and were living the American dream, or really so they thought. And their dream, Mr. Speaker, so often has turned into a true nightmare. Their children have developed, just bloody noses and respiratory ailments. Mr. Speaker, I've met with these families. It's really heartbreaking. They're having to pay for their current home, which is uninhabitable, and then go out and rent or maybe attempt to buy another home. It's a type of financial stress that so many of the families have been unable to adjust to, and many of them, so many of whom I've met with, have ended up having to file financial bankruptcy. So I appreciate the leadership of the chairwoman this evening and my friend and colleague Representative Deutsch, a co-chairman with me on the Contaminated Drywall Caucus. We've advanced, we believe, a sound piece of legislation, bipartisan, that really addresses this problem. It doesn't, and we don't pretend that it fixes everything, but it is a major and significant step forward. These families, the only thing they have left is, I think, hope that we'll do the right thing here tonight. It's been over 4 years that these families have been hurting. They looked first to the lender, to the importers of the drywall, to the insurers. They didn't find any real relief there. Some of the banks, to their credit, have given some consideration, but it's not enough. We've got to act tonight in this House, and I trust that we will. The bill takes China to task directly for failing to require their state-owned manufacturers to compensate the victims of their contaminated products. It expresses the undivided sense of Congress that the government of China needs to make right and to ensure that those who have lost so much are made whole. And as the chairwoman pointed out, clear labeling requirements are incorporated into the legislation, and also by limiting the amount of elemental sulfur allowed in the drywall, will ensure that drywall that is defective is not imported into this country. And I am delighted, as a lighter, smarter regulation advocate, that we have gone the route of voluntary standards. If we can go that direction, that's our preferred way above the regulatory approach. And so we set up the industry itself to advance in setting industry standards that will apply as well to foreign manufactured drywall products and protect our homeowners that way. Well, in closing, I just want to express my sincere appreciation again to all those who have made it possible for us to bring the bill to the floor tonight, and I trust and hope that we will pass it on unanimous consent tonight. I particularly want to thank my friend and colleague from Florida, Representative Deutsch, for your leadership and serving as the co-chairman of our caucus. You've just been terrific. Your staff has been terrific. I also want to thank the majority and minority members and the staff at the Energy and Commerce Committee who worked so hard to navigate a lot of challenges to get this bill to the floor. Mr. Speaker, this is common sense legislation. It is much needed. I know these families. They are hurting. And I trust and encourage my colleagues to do the right thing tonight and to advance this bill and to support it. With that, I thank the gentlelady for yielding time, and I yield back the remainder of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise in strong support of this amended form of H.R. 4212, the Drywall Safety Act of 2012. My friend, Mr. Riggle, is correct. When we have an opportunity to do something for the families in America who are really suffering, to do it in a common sense way and to do it in a bipartisan way, we have every responsibility to take that action. That's what this bill is about, and that's what this evening is about. In the wake of the 2005 and 2006 hurricane seasons, a domestic shortage of drywall developed in our country, drywall for rebuilding homes and businesses. To make up for the shortage, builders began importing several million tons of drywall from China. But it was not until 2009 that reports started to surface that, unbeknownst to the builders or the consumers, much of the drywall coming from China emitted high levels of corrosive sulfur. Currently, thousands of homeowners in 42 states and the District of Columbia, Puerto Rico, and American Samoa have been enduring an emergency situation in which contaminated drywall from China has been causing ever-worsening destruction and damage to their homes. It's also caused serious health problems for families living in those homes. And like my friend from Virginia, to have the opportunity to visit with a family and listen to them share their stories about the illnesses that come one after another to their children, ultimately forcing them to move from their homes, one can't help but be moved to action. The problematic drywall corrodes copper piping and wiring in homes, which also causes the failure of air conditioning systems, telecommunications wiring, wiring for lighting and other household appliances. Such corrosion poses both potential fire and safety hazards in homes and causes undue financial hardship for homeowners who are constantly forced to repair or replace essential appliances. The damage to the housing structure and the detrimental health impact on family members caused by contaminated Chinese drywall renders many of these homes simply uninhabitable. Such a situation forces some families to find alternate housing while also having to maintain the mortgages on their homes that are uninhabitable. In these difficult economic times, tremendous strain is being placed on limited family finances to constantly replace or make repairs to essential home appliances or to pay for other housing options while maintaining that mortgage on their uninhabitable home with Chinese drywall. These families have been and are in desperate need of assistance. This bill seeks to provide assistance to homeowners that have contaminated drywall in their homes and to prevent contaminated drywall from entering the country in the future. Our bill will assist homeowners who are victims of this problematic Chinese drywall by urging the Secretary of Commerce to insist that the Chinese government facilitate a meeting between the companies that manufacture the contaminated drywall and representatives of the U.S. government to help remedy homeowners that have the contaminated drywall in their homes. In addition, the bill urges the Secretary of Commerce to insist the Chinese government direct the companies that manufacture this contaminated drywall and exported it to this country to submit to the jurisdiction of the United States federal courts and to comply with any decisions issued by those courts on behalf of the homeowners with this contaminated drywall. The bill also will ensure that similar problematic drywall is not imported into this country in the future. It would require that each sheet of drywall that is imported for use in the U.S. be labeled with the name of the manufacturer and the month and year of manufacture. In addition, the bill requires that the Consumer Product Safety Commission ensure that future drywall manufactured or imported for use in the U.S. contain sulfur limits that do not cause elevated rates of corrosion in the home. And the bill requires the CPSC to revise the remediation guidance for homes with contaminated drywall to include a provision that contaminated drywall removed from homes should not be used in the production of new drywall. This bill, Mr. Speaker, is a product of bipartisan negotiations and demonstrates how this House works best when both sides work together to get something done for the American people. I really do want to express my sincere appreciation to my co-chair of the Congressional Contaminated Drywall Caucus, Congressman Rigel, for all of his hard work and leadership on this issue. I also want to thank the Energy and Commerce Committee, particularly Chairman Upton and Chairwoman Bono Mack, for their help, as well as the Ranking Member Waxman and the Ranking Member on the subcommittee, Congressman Butterfield. I'd also like to thank Congresswoman and Chair Ileana Ros-Lehtinen from the Foreign Affairs Committee for all of her hard work, together with that of Ranking Member Berman, in the commitment to finding a compromise to permit this bill to move forward. And finally, I'd like to recognize my friend Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart for his tireless work on this issue from the time the first reports of contaminated drywall surfaced, and to provide much-needed assistance to those victims of contaminated Chinese drywall. For all of these reasons, and for all of the people who have been affected, I urge my colleagues this evening to support the passage of H.R. 4212, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida yields back. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I have no further speakers, so I'm going to go ahead and close. And I just wanted to make one very important point here, and I think it's a great point to make right now, and that is Republicans and Democrats are united on this very important health and safety issue. Made in China is stamped on everything from kids' toys to consumer electronics, so let's just make sure it's stamped on our drywall too. And let's also make sure that this is a safe product, it's environmentally friendly, and someone stands behind it. I applaud Mr. Rangel for his hard work, and Mr. Deutsch, I thank them very much for bringing it to our attention and working with our committee. I, too, thank the staffs of the subcommittee and the full committee for all of their hard work over these many past days. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I'm going to ask that my colleagues support this bill, H.R. 4212, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlelady from California yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4212 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Without objection, the title is amended. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I would ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Energy and Commerce be discharged from further consideration of H.R. 6433 and ask for its immediate consideration in the House.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6433, a bill to make corrections with respect to Food and Drug Administration user fees.
Is there objection to the consideration of the bill? Without objection, the bill is engrossed, read a third time, and passed, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend the remarks, insert extraneous materials in the record on this bill, H.R. 6433, and I would like to include these letters in support of the bill.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I would ask to call up H.R. 6163, the National Pediatric Research Network Act of 2012.
Does the gentleman move to suspend the rules?
I do.
The clerk will read the bill. Report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6163, a bill to amend Title IV of the Public Health Service Act to provide for a national pediatric research network, including with respect to pediatric rare diseases or conditions.
All right. Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton, and the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, will each control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield myself 3 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, this legislation brings us a step closer to providing more help to children with unmet health needs, especially those with rare pediatric and genetic diseases. According to the National Institute of Health, the NIH, there are 6,800 rare diseases, and most of these conditions have no treatment or cure, and they primarily affect children. I would guess that everyone in this chamber is personally aware of the devastating impact of these diseases with some family that they would know. I myself have spent some time with a family from my district whose children have spinal muscular atrophy, SMA. It is a very rare pediatric disease that is the leading genetic cause of death in infants and toddlers. And these are great kids. I've got a picture of them, one of them here. When they came to see me, they told me that their name was Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty. And they really are. These are just really marvelous children. They're great kids, and they're a source of real sadness that their disease is at a time that's often incurable and often untreatable. But the barriers to research on rare and genetic diseases are those that are common to most research. It's already difficult to initiate the experimental and lengthy research needed to find treatments and cures. However, when the population of patients is so small, maybe only a couple dozen in a state, these problems are even more difficult to solve. So this legislation is going to help us establish pediatric research networks in a consortia that are a proven way to overcome those gaps in research. Networks and consortia will be comprised of leading institutions that act as partners to consolidate and coordinate research efforts. It promotes efficiency and collaboration, especially when a disease affects just a small number of children. So, Mr. Speaker, I would urge all my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation. I look forward to a strong vote tonight and working with our colleagues in the Senate to make sure that this bill really does get to the President's desk and makes a difference for families that are really in search of something that will help them with their kids. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Michigan reserves the balance of his time. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 5 minutes.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in healthcare professions, we know that children are not just little adults. They have unique health experiences, treatment needs, and research challenges. And while public and private research has come a long way on pediatric diseases over the years, we also know that we are still far behind on important diagnostics, cures, and treatments for far too many ailing children. And that's why I am so pleased to have co-authored the National Pediatric Research Network Act with my colleague and friend, Representative Kathy McMorris Rodgers. This bipartisan bill would improve research and clinical trials on pediatric diseases. It would train future pediatric researchers and disseminate research findings so quickly so that all children may benefit. It does not replace our current pediatric research investments. Instead, it builds upon the work already being done at the NIH and at research centers across the country by creating, as Chairman Upton said, research consortia to form a nationwide network of pediatric researchers. This is important so that we can make sure that we are always working with the most current science and that information is shared and also verified. And it will expand the geographic scope of research, giving sick kids easier access to research programs and clinical trials. Moreover, this bill will help a wider variety of institutions participating in this critical research while providing training grounds for our next generation of pediatric researchers. Another feature to this bill, a key feature to this bill, is that it will place an added emphasis on researching children's rare diseases, such as the one already described, spinal muscular atrophy, and to develop new treatments to fight them. The low prevalence of these diseases makes them particularly hard to research. And yet these diseases have such a marked impact on the lives of far too many families and also communities. The National Pediatric Research Network Act will be an important step forward to help these families and those who may develop these diseases long into the future. So I want to thank again the leadership of the ENC Committee, Energy and Commerce, Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Waxman, Chairman Pitts, and Ranking Member Pallone for their dedication to this bill, and to the staff. My staff, and especially Ruth Katz, committee staff, are working to improve the language and to bring this to the floor. My colleague, Congresswoman DeGette, for her leadership on this issue over the years. And just like Chairman Upton, I would especially like to thank my constituents, dear friends, and a very remarkable family, Bill and Victoria Strong, who are the parents, for their tireless work on behalf of their own daughter, Gwendolyn, who has spinal muscular atrophy as well, and just a few weeks ago celebrated with an amazing achievement, entering public kindergarten at the age of 5. She's the favorite of all of her classmates, and the parents are beside themselves with joy that this remarkable milestone has been achieved. And they work day to day, day in and day out, to make their daughter's world better. And in doing so, they have created a very strong community within our larger community of people who care about Gwendolyn, but also care about other children with similar kind of conditions and what we should be doing as a nation to stand with them. They have shown how entire communities can come together to fight diseases like SMA. So I urge my colleagues to follow their example. We need to come together now to support this bill, and in doing so, we support families like those in Michigan and in Santa Barbara, California, and other places as well, to do all we can do to make this a law and give them hope and courage for the future. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I will yield myself 30 seconds. I just want to again thank Mrs. Capps. So many of us, as we meet these families, we really did not know about these diseases until we saw their courage and what they do as they confront this every day. And it's marvelous for me as I've now visited my family that has this disease 2 years in a row. And it's great to see them grow and remember where they were, and to really think that there's going to be hope and with legislation that we can see that's done. And with that, I would yield 5 minutes to the gentlelady from Washington State, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, who has also been, as we look at a bipartisan leadership, a real trooper to move this legislation not only through our committee, but now on the House floor.
Gentlelady from Washington is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the chairman, I thank my colleague and friend Representative Lois Capps, and rise today in strong support of this legislation, H.R. 6163, the National Pediatric Research Network Act, which is going to build on America's commitment to pediatric medical research. And that commitment has already led to the prevention and treatment of terrible conditions such as polio, meningitis, childhood leukemia, congenital heart disease. With budgets being squeezed like no time in recent memory, it has never been more important to support projects which leverage every single dollar. Research networks have a proven track record in their ability to ensure collaboration and the sharing of resources, which in turn have led to medical discoveries that have improved lives. For example, the National Cancer Institute funded Children's Oncology Group has advanced our understanding and treatment of childhood cancers, and this group has resulted in a cure for some types of childhood leukemia. The Pediatric Heart Network has improved the outcomes for children born with congenital heart disease. I'm proud to have introduced this legislation with my colleague, Representative Capps, this legislation is going to authorize NIH to establish up to 20 pediatric research networks across this country. And each network will be selected by NIH through a competitive review process. These networks will allow multiple institutions to work together in a hub-and-spoke fashion to encourage collaboration. And some of these networks will focus on rare diseases, such as spinal muscular atrophy. Other networks will focus on the genetic diseases that have their onset in childhood, including Fragile X, Down syndrome. It's important to develop a framework for these rare and genetic diseases for a number of reasons. First of all, researchers in these areas are often working in isolation, and this legislation is going to help overcome that barrier. Second, there's not many children with these disorders in one place, so it makes it difficult to connect the researchers to those that want to participate in the studies. Finally, the study of these rare and genetic diseases may lead to treatments that will help many people. For example, we've learned that there's a specific biological link between Down syndrome and Alzheimer's disease. It's conceivable that the research that can result in the improvement in cognition in Down syndrome could also prevent the loss of cognition that is seen in Alzheimer's. These pediatric networks will improve health outcomes for children and adults by encouraging teamwork among the researchers, the patients, and NIH. This is important and positive legislation. I'm proud to support it, and I urge my colleagues to support and yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
I'm prepared to yield back. And in closing, Mr. Speaker, the National Pediatric Research Network Act is a very important bill, not just for current and future researchers, but for sick children and their families, today and in the future. It's a bipartisan measure that will really leverage all the good work that is currently being done on pediatric diseases, but that will also fill gaps that make it so hard for progress to be made. So I urge full support for this bill, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield 2 minutes to the chairman of the Health Subcommittee, Joe Pitts, in support of the legislation.
Mr. Pitts is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, H.R. 6163, the National Pediatric Research Network Act, seeks to address important unmet needs in pediatric health. Pediatric research is so important to the health of our children, and it is essential to finding answers for unmet health needs. According to the National Institutes for Health, there are between 6,000 and 7,000 diseases considered rare that affect 25 to 30 million people. Most of the approximately 7,000 rare diseases are pediatric diseases and often genetic. Unfortunately, the doctors do not have sufficient therapies to treat them. This bill seeks to alleviate that problem by establishing pediatric research networks and consortia. They will help by coordinating research efforts among participating institutions, concentrating that effort on the most pressing needs, and enlisting the help of well-trained researchers. Through my association with Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, I'm aware that there are too many diseases that children and their families face that do not have easy answers and few adequate treatments. This bill will strengthen basic and clinical research and bring us closer to finding new treatments and cures. Mr. Speaker, this bill has strong bipartisan support. I urge my colleagues to support the bill, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania yields back. Gentleman from Michigan is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, and I know the hour is late, I would just urge all my colleagues to support this bipartisan legislation. I, too, commend every member that's had a role here and truly appreciate the staff to get this bill prepared and ready for us to vote on tonight. And with that, I yield back the balance of our time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6163 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended, the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table.
What do you have?
For what reason does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I move to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 6118, the Taking Essential Steps for Testing Act of 2012.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 6118, a bill to amend Section 353 of the Public Health Service Act with respect to suspension, revocation, and limitation of laboratory certification.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts, and the gentlelady from California, Ms. Capps, will each control 20 minutes. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and insert extraneous materials in the record on H.R. 6118.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Mr. Speaker, I rise today to support H.R. 6118, the Taking Essential Steps for Testing Act of 2012. H.R. 6118 would give the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services much-needed regulatory flexibility to enforce prohibitions against improper referrals of proficiency testing under the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments. In order to operate as a business, laboratories must adhere to CMS procedures for processing samples, must share testing results with CMS periodically, and are prohibited from intentionally referring testing samples to any other lab. Currently, the Centers for Medicaid Services is required under statute to revoke the CLIA certificate of any laboratory that intentionally refers its proficiency testing samples to another laboratory for testing for a period of 1 year. In addition, the statute requires that a person who has owned or operated a laboratory which has had its CLIA certification revoked, including those owning multiple labs, may not own or operate a laboratory for a period of 2 years following such revocation. However, there have been instances where a hospital or independent laboratory has accidentally referred a PT sample to another lab due to mistakes by employees or through automated systems. In such instances, CMS is not allowed by law to consider the circumstances under which the test was accidentally referred or if the lab acted in good faith to report and address the incident. H.R. 6118 would address these issues by amending Section 353 of the Public Health Service Act to allow the Secretary discretion to determine whether the 1-year ban on laboratories should be applied, and the flexibility to levy intermediate sanctions instead of the 2-year prohibition against ownership or operation of a lab. The legislation enjoys bipartisan support among this body as well as numerous organizations, including the American Clinical Laboratory Association, the American Hospital Association, the College of American Pathologists, and the Clinical Laboratory Management Association, among others. I would like to thank Congressman Grimm and Roscom for their work on this legislation, and I urge members to support the bill, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Pennsylvania reserves. The gentlelady from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 5 minutes.
The gentlelady is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, the Taking Essential Steps for Testing Act. This is a bipartisan, sensible bill which will provide the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services the flexibility it needs in imposing penalties on clinical laboratories that violate certain recertification procedures. While not commonly discussed, the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments of 1988, or CLIA, is an important law that ensures all labs operating in the United States can be trusted. Under CLIA, all labs must be certified to prove they are qualified to perform clinical tests while meeting certain quality and safety standards. We can all agree this is a good thing. Labs are periodically retested to keep their CLIA certification. And to do this, labs are required to perform proficiency tests, which measure the quality and competency of a lab's work. Unlike some tests that come to a lab that can be sent out to other labs, proficiency tests must be performed in-house. Currently, if a lab is found to have referred a proficiency test to another lab, the Secretary of HHS must revoke that lab certificate for at least 1 year, and this prevents it from participating in Medicare or Medicaid for that period. In addition, the operator of any lab that has had its certificate revoked is barred from owning or operated any certified labs for 2 years. However, current law does not allow the Secretary any flexibility in imposing these penalties for labs that improperly refer proficiency tests, even when it's an unintentional referral. This has led to labs that are being shut down across the country, potentially affecting patient care and access, even when their actions are not worthy of such a sanction. This is especially pronounced when the sanction occurs on just one lab that is part of a larger health care system, as the penalties apply to the entire system, even if all the other labs happen to be in compliance. So this legislation would help address these problems by allowing CMS the flexibility to institute lesser sanctions to really address the problem instead of penalizing an entire system for unintentional proficiency test referrals. The bill does so without changing the accountability within the law or making our labs less reliable. And CMS will be required and able to hold so-called bad actors accountable. This bill is very common sense, and it's a reform to CLIA, and I'm pleased to support it. I urge my colleagues to do so as well. And now I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady reserves the balance of her time. The gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 4 minutes to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Grimm.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 4 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for yielding time. Today I rise in strong support of this legislation, H.R. 6118, the Taking Essential Steps for Testing Act. I'd like to thank Chairman Upton for his leadership and the Ranking Member Waxman, as well as the Health Subcommittee and their entire staff for their support and dedication to this important bill. The TEST Act is a bipartisan and bicameral solution to an issue that threatens Americans' access to health care. Under the Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments, CLIA, any lab that conducts human specimen testing must have a CLIA certificate and comply with the law's proficient testing, PT, requirements. CLIA requires labs to treat PT samples as it would a patient sample. However, the law explicitly prohibits a lab from referring a PT sample to another laboratory, although this may be normal for patient procedures. The purpose of this prohibition is to ensure labs submit their own results for PT samples. And I believe that this does clearly promote continued patient safety, accurate results, and that a lab is not getting reimbursed for tests it does not or cannot perform. The concern is that labs which have accidentally referred a PT sample to another lab and self-reported this mistake are being told by CMS that CLIA does not provide any flexibility, and therefore their certificates must be revoked. As a result, labs that make a mistake and proactively try to correct it are treated identically to labs that knowingly and in bad faith violate the law. Without a CLIA certificate, as we have heard, labs are unable to conduct any human specimen testing. For hospitals, this could mean choosing between shutting down essentially all services, from the ER to the operating room, or paying millions of dollars to bring in an outside lab for 2 years. Both of these options result in reduced access to health care and other related services for patients. The TEST Act gives CMS discretion to not revoke a CLIA certificate for a PT referral if it is determined that the lab was acting in good faith. And for labs which are bad actors, the TEST Act does nothing to alter CMS's ability to punish those labs and revoke their certificate. H.R. 6118 also gives CMS the discretion to not apply the revocation to an entire hospital network or other owner-operators based on the facts of a particular case. In determining whether or not to revoke a CLIA certificate, I urge CMS to consider factors such as the nature of the violation, the lab's history of compliance and past PT experience, whether or not the lab voluntarily reported the referral, any remedial actions taken by the lab, and any recommendations made by the state or applicable accrediting organizations. And I'd like to end by saying thank you to all of my colleagues that helped support this legislation, and I urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of H.R. 6118. It's common sense legislation that ultimately puts patients first. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from New York yields back. Gentlelady from California is recognized.
May I ask if the chairman, if he has more speakers? We have no speakers. Okay. Well,
Gentlelady's recognized.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, the